What's up? How you doing, Judah?
I am doing awesome, man. I am excited. Look at our new branding here. Look at everything that we have going on. This is very, very exciting. So this is
Right.
everybody should kind of see what our announcement that we were teasing last week is.
That's right. Yeah, we can start our off the week's news by kind of discussing like what the heck, man. We're now affiliated with Real Estate Hackers, which is a Central PA, conference and a platform for a lot of real estate education. Um, Judah, if you don't mind,
Yeah, so Real Estate Hackers is a great brand that I've been a part of. They run several meetups. They have a really great website and web presence that they're building out at realestatehackers.com, where they've got links to those different meetups and different resources. Chad Gallagher hosts a podcast, Real Estate Hackers, where they discuss it's the intersection of technology and real estate,
yep.
and it's a great podcast. Highly recommend it. He's got some amazing guests on there. It's hosted and produced by On Air Brands, which is another really awesome company to be affiliated with. And Real Estate Hackers found out about what we were doing, really liked this show. They came to us and said, "Hey, we would love to kind of shine a bigger spotlight on the content that you're producing. And we think that it'll be great for our brand, and we think it'll be great for this show that you're doing." And so we really jumped on that opportunity, and we are very exciting. So Real Estate Hackers is kind of going to be giving us a bigger microphone here. They're going to be doing some of the underwriting for the show and helping us do some things. So realestatehackers.com. Also check out the convention that we're having, or conference, whatever you want to call it. It was going to be like back in May, and we had to push it back. What are the dates, Josh? You
It's
actually
it's June 26th to the 28th.
right.
There's a ton of information.
You're
There's
going to be there, right, Josh?
speakers. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the it's going to be amazing. Like there's a lot of great speakers. I actually talked to Chad about this prior to to looking at the Real Estate Hackers and hooking up with you. But it's a really great platform. There's a ton of great speakers. There's really good information. In fact, one of the main speakers, Matt Faircloth, is going to be with us, I believe Thursday, right?
Thursday this week, we've got Matt
Yeah,
Faircloth coming on. He's the guy who wrote the book for Bigger Pockets on how to raise private money and how to raise private capital. So Matt is a legend in the industry and was raising private capital before it was the cool thing to do. And we're going to be talking to him on Thursday of this week.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, so let's talk about some news here from over the weekend. There's some really interesting stuff happening out there in the market, and where do you want to start? You want to start with the good, the bad, or the ugly?
I say we start with the bad news because I'm really, really, really excited about the good news. So you found a piece of bad news that you wanted to talk about, then I'll talk about my piece of good news.
Yeah. So one of the sites that I follow that is usually like the Debbie Downer. I mean, definitely negative side of everything. But they also can start to kind of release some of the trends that end up coming to fruition. It was announced last week that Wells Fargo stopped applications as of April 30th for HELOCs. There's been a couple other banks that are stopping taking new applications for home equity lines of credit, and so that's not a great indicator right now of future home prices. If you don't know, a home equity line of credit is essentially a line of credit against the equity in your house, and if home prices go down, well, they're not going to lend you money against equity that's not there. So, there's a lot of uncertainty, obviously, in the market, and I think, that's probably the ugly. The bad, I think, is probably that we're not out of complete lockdown. However, that kind of transitions into some brighter news. It looks like, construction's back, right?
Right.
Today's the first day when all construction's back for non-owner occupied properties. So that's awesome. If you have a flip that you've been waiting to jump into, or a rental that you need to renovate, So I mean, that's kind of the start. And you want to jump in here and kind
Yeah,
of
I
talk
think
about.
I think there's I think that that's great. I feel like business pace is definitely picking up, even though we're social distancing, and even though we're still slightly quarantined. This weekend, Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha, as he is called,
Yep.
he is, just a guy who has a lot of folksy wisdom and says a lot of things very plainly. He runs Berkshire Hathaway. He's 80 cajillion years old, roughly. The only number bigger than Warren Buffett's age is the amount of cash he has, not the amount of not their net worth, but like Warren Buffett is sitting on like $150 billion in cash that they are ready to deploy when they find opportunities. And Warren Buffett said this weekend at their shareholders meeting, he said, "Don't bet against America." He said, "America is a mythical, magical place." And she's never been down and out for the count yet. I kind of liken America to Disney, and maybe this is just me, but like there's just I mean, I'm a 40-year-old man, and I admit that there is like Disney magic, right?
Yeah.
Like there's others that come close, and there's other good theme parks out there, and there's other good animation studios and everything like that. But like I am a wordsmith and I can't describe the Disney magic. America's the same way. I mean, I am long term bullish on America, always have been, always will be. It was, and I get called like a super patriot or, a right wing extremist sometimes when I say that, which may or may not be true. But I love this country and I think it's a great country. And I really think that it was cool to hear Warren Buffett come out and say that this weekend. I mean,
Yeah.
what was the quote? Josh, you and I put it in our notes here. Is American miracle,
Yeah.
American magic,
Yeah.
and America has always prevailed. And he did a slideshow presentation because they weren't live, and he said, "Just don't bet against America." I just love it.
Well, I love the Ronald Reagan quote. The shining city on a hill. I
Right,
mean, America is an amazing place because it gives everybody an opportunity to succeed. And you know what? There have been different times in history where success is a little bit more favored than in other
right,
times in history. But it is really scary sometimes. You look at all the bad stuff; it can get overwhelming. But the truth is, in every downturn, in every time there's something terrible or negative, we also have the flip side. We
right.
also have the opportunity. It's really two sides of each coin. And if you're looking at real estate as a way to succeed in life and better your position in life, there's no better time than right now. I mean, how
Right.
many people do you know that? When I first got started investing, I was so upset that I missed the peaks of 2005 and 2006. And oh my goodness, it was so terrible. But there was a huge amount of opportunity coming off that downturn. And we're running right into that now. And
Right.
one takeaway of the after Berkshire Hathaway, it's interesting the analysis that they had on the airline industry. I don't know if you saw
Yeah.
it or not, but the analysis that came away from Berkshire Hathaway is that they thought that a lot less travelers were going to be, or a lot less people were going to be using airlines. And I think that's kind of indicative of the changes that we've had in our society over the last couple of weeks, months. People have become much more comfortable talking face to face like you and I are right now. That's an opportunity. That's a crack where, yeah, you might have one industry that it's a downturn for flights and travel and things like that. But on the flip side, that's an opportunity somewhere else to provide value in the marketplace, provide value for business people and travel and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think that another great opportunity that's going to come out of this is as we're all becoming more and more comfortable with video conferencing.
Yep.
I used to try and walk 5 or 10 houses a day and make people offers on them.
Yeah.
Could you imagine walking 30 or 40 houses a day?
Yeah.
And as people are comfortable letting you into their house.
Mhm.
So I think that the times that are coming, it's going to be a lot easier to meet people. It's going to be a lot easier to build rapport, and we just have to seize on these opportunities. So, but Josh, on Friday, I'm going to kind of set you up here. On Friday, we bit off way more than we can chew, which is what we always want to do.
That's right.
We always want to deliver more content than what we can actually fit into one show. And
Yep.
so we were talking about the ways of evaluating properties, and I learned things from what we were talking about. I mean, I'm not ashamed to admit it. So on Friday, we talked about the importance of understanding the appraised value of a property and everything that goes into an appraisal. And you can check that show out if you want to. We also covered how, like, what is going to be the resale value. And
Right.
the difference between those two things are related, but the resale value and the appraisal are different. And it's kind of like a triangle, like where these things are kind of related each to each other. Because today we're going to be talking about cash flow, and cash flow plays into appraised value a little bit and also plays into a little bit of what it will resell for. But it's a
That's
different way of valuing properties. So why don't you? And actually, I think it's almost sometimes the most complex. So it's a good thing that we've got, a full 20 minutes here just to talk straight about this, and then we'll do some wrap up at the end. So talk to us about cash flow.
Okay, so I'm going to pull up this slide from. All right, so the cash flow is a really interesting situation, right? Specifically, we're not talking about the Burr investor here. We're talking about people that want to buy an asset, hold it, and not have debt against it, not necessarily have debt against it. This whole analysis is all based on what you can get as a return on your money. I mean, and in a perfect world with an honest analysis, this is what you would see on a cap rate. But the truth is, my opinion of a cap rate most of the time is a place to hide numbers, right? You kind of manipulate the details. The first thing that we want to look at on a cash flow investment is the type of neighborhood that we're investing in, because it's going to vary greatly both on the type of tenants you're going to be able to pool, the type of rents, the type of appreciation you're going to see, and the discounts you're going to get. In a bull market where we've got increasing values and a likelihood of continued upside in rising property values, C and D class neighborhoods can be really advantageous if you're doing that Burr method. But if you're looking for solid, consistent returns that you can bank on, the closer you get to that A-class neighborhood, the better. And so you've got I used to call them paper tigers, right? In the D-class neighborhood, you've got a property that you can pick up for $20,000. You put 15 or 20 into it, and all of a sudden you're getting $1,200 a month in rent. Looks great on paper until you realize that the people don't have $1,200 a month. They're going to trash the house sometimes, and your collections are going to be much lower than anticipated. Whereas on an A-class neighborhood, a lot of times what you run into is returns that are in the low single digits. You're looking at 1-2% returns on your money, and nobody really wants that, right? So finding that blend is really the key, and basing that analysis on a real life return is what's important. Usually the C+, B- to B grade neighborhoods are really kind of the sweet spot. So what we're looking for.
Let me just jump in, Josh, right there and say that I agree with you. At Slate House Group, I'm an executive over there with Slate House Group, and we not only do property management, but we also do real estate services as well. And we have about 15 or 20 realtors, and we had a call with all of our realtors last week, and just telling people, like, moving forward, we would like to see people buy in B-class properties if they're going to be looking for cash flow and rentals. You can make money in C's and D's, you can make money as A's and things like that. And there's good and bads of all that. And, every client is different. But if somebody were to say, where should I start? What should I get started with? What am I looking for? A good, B plus B to B minus property is a great place to be. And that's kind of our official position over at Slate House Group.
Well, and you get the best bang for your buck. You can find the discounted property, you can build in the equity, you can get good cash flow while still maintaining a good solid tenant base of working class tenants. And that's really the ideal situation. So, one of the things that you're looking for in a cash flow asset is going to be its proximity to things that matter. Why would people want to live there? Well, if it's close to a big employer, You can pick off employees that work like close to a hospital is a great situation, because maybe you have nurses and doctors and things like that want to live close to work, close to transportation. If you're in an urban environment, really easy public transportation access is really important. Things like proximity. I mean, I'm here right outside of Hershey. Proximity to local attractions. There's a ton of Airbnbs right outside of Hershey that cater to people that want to come to town and enjoy the park, spend the weekend here, don't want to stay in a hotel, they want a larger space. Those kind of things are going to play into a cash flow environment, and they're going to be important. Now, one thing that is kind of a downside on these type of investments is you want to stay away from those recurring fees. We're going to look at a cash flow analysis. Again, this is a tool that I've developed over the years that I'm happy to send to people if they're interested. But Steve Mahler's on here. He's one of my clients from the turnkey business in the past, and he's seen this analysis. We'll be able to take a look at this. But the bottom line is, the stuff that kills you on a cash flow investment are the things that happen every single year. It's why high taxes will just eat you alive. Some other things that will really eat into your returns are going to be HOAs, association fees. If you live in a historic district where it really restricts the use or the look of the property, that can really, have an unintended consequence. It might be a really cool area, but just costs too much, for a good return. And the last thing you really want to look for in these neighborhoods is how much competition you have. It'll give you a lot of insight as far as, number one, is there a demand? Because if there's no competition, it's likely that there's no demand, and that's why nobody else is in the space. But at the same time, you don't want so much competition that you can't make any money there, right? So you kind of want to have something, and again, that goes to that B-, B grade neighborhood, So tenant quality in a cash flow investment is so important, right? It goes back to that D versus A class neighborhood. In a lot of A grade neighborhoods, it's not a question of if you have a good credit score or not, right? You almost don't have to underwrite without a credit report. Once you see the credit report, whether you can rent to them or not, because most of the tenants have a high salary. They take care of their place, and it's an anomaly to have to evict. Flip side is, if you're in a lower grade neighborhood, you're going to have fewer quality tenants with decent credit, decent income, and consistency. And so you got to increase your vacancy rates. You got to increase your turnover costs and things like that. The bottom line with all of this is going to be the net operating income. How much money at the end of the day are you going to get as a return for that investment? And this is all about the cash flow, and it's not about appreciation. It's the appreciation's completely excluded from this calculation.
Right. So NOI is a way that you can valuate a property. So a lot of people think when they buy a piece of real estate, they're buying a house or they're buying land.
Right.
When you're using the cash flow method, you're not. You're buying a revenue stream. You're buying a stream of checks coming into your mailbox. But what comes along with that is a stack of bills that need to be paid monthly, quarterly, annually. So when you compare the stack of bills and the checks that you're going to be receiving strictly on a cash flow basis, there's a way of evaluating that and comparing those two with each other. And that's how you come up with an NOI. So, so if you have a question of, do I buy property A? Well, let's not even, I don't want to confuse with classes. So do I buy property X for $150,000? Or do I buy property Z for $80,000? Property Z might have a higher NOI, even though it has a lower cash flow. So you want to be doing properties that fit your budget, but have as high a possible NOI without being, in an overly risky neighborhood. So it's a way that you can evaluate two properties of two different values, because if you say, oh, well, this property cash flows more than this property, therefore it's better. Well, maybe not, because if if the NOI is lower, just because it has a higher cash flow doesn't mean it's a more profitable investment.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And it's really important with an NOI to make sure that you're calculating all of the expenses, that you're able to work in the real life numbers. And if you've never done this before, to have enough of a background to be able to say, okay, my vacancy rate, vacancy rates, they make me laugh sometimes. You see this all the time. Oh, 4%, 5%. Well, what does that really play out to? A 4% vacancy rate is 15 days a year of an empty house. And that's totally possible. It's reasonable if you have an asset that's in high demand and your tenant stays for several years.
Right.
But when you
average over 20 years is it's going to be vacant every 15 years. You know what I mean? So sometimes with a property, you'll have a tenant that lasts 2 or 3 years. But then, I mean, we get into this in Central PA where we've got rentals that are like $2,600 a month. I mean, they're the equivalent of $1 million rental property. You know what I mean? They're $1 million listing or something like that in the rental world. And so when a tenant stays for 2 or 3 years, but then it takes us 2 or 3 months to replace that tenant. So it ends up that they're actually, even in those high quality places, you still have about a month worth of vacancy you still have a little bit less, but you still have about a month of vacancy every year.
But let's be honest. If you've never done this before and you're doing it yourself, right? I know this from personal experience. I've banged my head against the wall one too many times and hit my hand with a hammer, more than I want to admit. You think about a tenant moves out on Friday. Even if you're really quick and on top of it, you go into the house, you evaluate it, you have a couple contractors come in, and now you're a week later. Nothing's been done. No work's been done.
Right.
And now you got a week where the construction starts. Now you're 2 weeks in. If it's a late, turnover, and now you've got 2 weeks to place a tenant. That's not that's 1 out of 12. That's an 8% vacancy rate. And that's if you time it perfectly, and in 1 month you got somebody into that property. So, I mean, here's a this is a tool that I use to analyze rental properties in general, and it's a good way to look at cash flow, right? So let's say we're buying a property that it's worth $150,000, right? We negotiate a great deal. We're going to get this for $100,000. Our closing costs here. You're going to have the builder's risk insurance, which we talked about last week about, you got a vacant property. You got to make sure that it's covered with the right insurance. We got a transfer tax and title insurance. And then we throw in some miscellaneous fees here. So we got about $4,000 in closing costs. And then we've got our construction costs. In this case, it's going to be, just under $24,000, $23,500, whatever. So our total investment cost here is just shy of $130,000. Now we calculate our income. We got to put in our rents. That's going to rent for $1,350 a month, and our vacancy rate. In this case, I've got what is this? C22. Yeah, the problem is I put all these things in and I never know what they are. So our vacancy rate here. So we're losing it. We're turning over. We're anticipating here a tenant staying for 5 years. I know that was the average of what I used to see. But let's say they're only going to stay for 24 months. Okay. And every 24 months, we're going to lose a month's rent. All right. So we've got this set up. This is our 4% vacancy rate. We're going to lose $675 a year. Comes to $15,000. This is where we really, our adjusted gross income here is going to be $15,500 a year. But once we get into expenses, this is when things kind of get interesting, right? Now, I've got a third of the income going to expenses, and this is a well-managed property. We've got our annual rental license. We're assuming there's no HOA fees and that the tenant's going to cover all the utilities on the property here. But we've got our property insurance, we've got our property taxes, we've got our leasing fee. So this is something that is really important to understand. If you are not a real estate professional and you're trying to lease these things out yourself, you can do it. But even if you're not going to have somebody manage the property for you, I always recommend to hire a leasing agent. It will cost you 1 month's rent. I don't know what Slate House
Slate House
charges.
charges half a month's rent, but this is such a critical thing to put into a spreadsheet because a lot of people when they're like, well, I'm going to hire a property manager, and they just throw in 10% or Slate House charges 6%, whatever that is. But if you also need to account for that leasing fee, and so I think taking a month is a good thing, even though Slate House is only half a month. Take a month and then divide it by your annual, what you're expecting. And 5 years is, I think, a little bit aggressive, but not so high aggressive. And you divide it by whatever it's going to be, and you come up with your expenses.
Right, and you annualize it so that
Right.
realizing that on year one it's going to be the whole thing, but then you're not going to have to pay it next year. But if you annualize it,
here's the example: if it's $1,000 a month rent, and a property manager or a leasing agent is going to charge you a whole month's rent, and you're anticipating over 20 years, the average tenant is going to stay for 4 years, you would charge yourself $250 a year. 1,000 divided by 4, you would charge yourself $250 per year in a leasing fee, and that is critical to do. If you miss that, you're lying to yourself.
that's right. All right. So and then you got management. I've got 7% on here. Slate House is 6. That's excellent if you've got a good manager at those kind of numbers. And then repairs and maintenance. So this is something that was kind of tough for me to realize. This is a simple analysis for a single family home. And in the past, anytime I bought a rental, it's been a value add rental property. So we're going in and doing pretty major construction. I mean, our average renovation was between $60,000 and $65,000 on a single family 3-bedroom, 1.5 or 2 bathroom. So we're gutting everything. It's a gut job, ground up. I look at this and I say, okay, over a 10-year period, we're probably not going to have much CapEx, but we are going to have maintenance. The first year it might be 0, but it still might be 0 year 2. But it accumulates. There's going to be an added maintenance expense throughout the life of that property. I saw Anna Kelly on Saturday. I was looking at a property that she had for sale. Right here, we have about 36% here as our overhead expenses or operating expenses. She calculates between 45 and 50% on larger multifamilies, especially if you're older. So, I mean, depending on what your numbers are, you got to look at the real world. If 5% is not going to be appropriate for maintenance because the place is dated, if you're not updating everything, put 10 or 15% in there and put that money away every month.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, we've got our net operating expense here. This is less than $100 a month. We've got $9,800 coming back at us each year from $127,000. And on the surface, that doesn't look like much, but the reality is you probably have $300 to $400, maybe even $500 every month after your basic expenses are covered. But you have to put the rest of that money away so that when it's time to pay it, you're not digging in your pocket going, where the heck's the money for the maintenance call or the roof leak or the heater or whatever it is. So in this case, we have a 7.71% return on investment. That's our net.
That's just cash flow. You're also going to get tax deductible benefits. Check with your CPA about that. You're also, the property is going to go up 3 to 5% a year as well. So when you look at, you're looking at a 10 to 11% total investment, but the cash on cash investment, if you buy this property unlevered, is going to be 7, almost 8%.
And you know what? Right now, in the current environment, I think 7.71% is probably lower than I'd like to be in an investment. Right? I'd be looking at probably a 10% cap rate is what I really.
Well, yeah, because over the last 3 to 5 years, we've seen cap rate compression.
That's right.
And we've seen, and so what's beautiful is everyone's freaking out, but really, like now is actually when we're going to see values come down a little bit, and when values come down a little bit, we actually see cap rates go up as well.
Well, and I say that because we can go over here and say, okay, instead of $100,000, let's say we pay $50 for that property. if I can get this thing for 50% or 50,000, now we're at almost a 13% return, on our money. And that's pretty nice return.
But the point is, it's not an 80% return. Like, that's the difference from going from $100,000 a fair price to like stealing the property at 50. And you only, so like, I see a lot of people out there putting a whole bunch more effort into making a really good deal, like trying to make it a perfect deal. And I just think that's a problem. The other thing to look at here that's so great about real estate that we haven't even touched on is, what's our total cash into this property?
100 and just call it 107. I changed this to 80,000. So 80,000 is a very reachable number on a $150,000 property.
Right.
You want to be able to get to that point. Look at
the built-in equity you've got from day one right away too. And also, when you have appreciation, this property is going to go up in value. And I know this is a cash flow analysis, so we don't want to, we're not banking on appreciation, but like, don't forget, when you do this deal, what goes up in value by 3 to 5% a year on average is the 150, not the 107.
That's right. Exactly. That's exactly right. And I mean, one thing that I want to point out here. So we're going to jump, actually, we can jump into this right now. We're in a time of changing market, right? The market is in flux right now. So how do you adjust to that change in value when you're anticipating, okay, so what's going to happen next? The nice thing about a cash flow analysis is that we can come back to this analysis. Let me make sure. Yeah. And let's say we have a 20% reduction in property value.
Right.
That's $30,000. Guess what? It doesn't change my NOI at all. Not one penny. It stays exactly the same. And on a 10-year period, we're not going to get back to 150,000. We're going to get to 180, 200,000. And over that time, if we choose to get a mortgage, that 106, that number is going to creep down and creep down and creep down, so that our principal is going to keep dropping and dropping and dropping. So, I mean, there's a lot of benefits there. You just have to know that, look, if you're paying $150,000 for a $150,000 property right now, it better cash flow really well. And you better be looking for the long haul, knowing that things are going to change.
Right.
So let's talk about figuring out which way the wind blows, right? How to kind of anticipate what's going to happen in the future. I mean, we've gone through a really, really long, robust real estate market until this COVID stuff came out, and we've been due for an adjustment. So the first thing that we got to take a look at, if you're uncertain of where the market's going to go, is do a really sober analysis of whether we're looking at a stable, appreciating, or a depreciating market. When I'm looking at an area, we can always look at past records, but you also can look at what's going to happen in the future. We touched on this Friday a little bit. By looking at listings or the coming soon properties that are hitting the market. Those coming soon listings and those the new listings that are going on the market are a good indicator of where the market's going. If you have home values pretty solidly in the 200,000 range, and then there's a couple listings at 220 or 215, or it's probably a pretty good bet that we're in an appreciating market. People are pushing numbers, and obviously we're talking about really nice renovated properties, things like that. But if we're in that same neighborhood, there are $200,000 values, and you see some decent looking properties hitting the market at 190 or 185, that's going to give me some pause, right? What's going to happen next? We got to look at the length of the current trend. I mean, 10 years is a typical real estate cycle. We go from bottom to top, back to bottom again. So if we know that we've been sitting at the top, it's kind of like coming up on a stalled yellow, right? You're driving down the road, and you're 20 yards away, and the light turns yellow, and now you're 10 yards, and you're getting up to 5. It's like, hey, look, that yellow light, unless you're speeding down the road, that yellow light's getting a little old. You're about to run through a red light. You got to get that feeling while you're looking at the market about what's going to happen next. A friend of mine, I got a quote coming up in the last slide here. A friend of mine a couple of years ago stopped investing. He was a really good flipper, would do 20 or 30 units a year and got top dollar all the time. And he went from doing 20 or 30 flips a year to just stopping investing. And what he saw was the market kept going up and up and up and up and up. And yeah, maybe he missed 2 years of upside, but he gets zero downside.
Right.
You know, and he just stepped out, bought some rentals, did some other things. Another factor that we got to look at is supply and demand. You know, that's the basics of economics. The more supply and the less demand you have, prices are going to go down. More demand and less supply, prices are going to go up. Other factors, external factors, are like changes in major employers. If you've got in Philadelphia, we had some closings of different hospitals and things like that, or new employees come into the market, like Amazon establishing these regional distribution centers. Like, that's going to affect housing market because people are going to have more money to spend. Right now, we're in an external factor of this COVID-19 where you got all these people being laid off. So high unemployment rates, less people in the market to buy. That goes back to supply and demand. And, rate of change. How quickly are things changing? Is this an overnight sensation where today a property is worth 200 grand and tomorrow it's worth 150? Or is this something that's going to be a creeping slow decline where, if it's going to take you 6 months to get a property on the market, you're not going to see a 50% reduction in prices?
Yeah, these are great. These are all things that you can look at to say which way is the wind blowing, because I hate when people, say, oh, well, if I knew what was going to happen with property values and I had a crystal ball, well, whatever. Well, yeah, I mean, sure, but there's indicators you can look at that can tell you what likely is happening and what likely is coming. I completely agree.
Yeah. So the biggest thing that I would say about predicting the future, this same guy that stopped investing that I just mentioned, right? His name's Josh Hertz. We had a mastermind luncheon several years ago, and he said, one of my biggest takeaways from doing business was not always to look at the upside of, hey, this looks like a great investment. This is what my return's going to be. Look how much money I can make. It's to consider what it will cost, because really, everything costs you something. It might be time, reputation. It might be, who knows, time, money, whatever. Consider what the potential downside is, what it could cost you. And if you still look at that investment and say, this is my downside, this is my upside, and it still makes sense, hey, sounds like a great investment. If not, maybe you pass. It's just a little bit of perspective.
Dude, I love it, man. So this is what we're going to be doing moving forward, guys. We're going to be right here on the Real Estate Hackers channel, and you can follow us there. And we are going to be picking up more distribution nodes, be it through not just Facebook Live and YouTube, but also Instagram and other social media platforms. We're really looking to grow and build this out. Our goal is to talk about the news, talk about what's happening, talk about timely, relevant data, not go on and on about it, but spend about 10 or 15 minutes on that, 5 to 10 minutes on that, and then spend about 15 to 20 minutes on some real estate training, some topical stuff, some things that's valuable, also supply some really good tools to people who need them. So if you want, all you have to do is email Josh. I'm going to put up your email here, Josh, so that people can reach out to you at Hard Money Bankers. And Josh at Hard Money Bankers, you just email him and say, hey, send me that cash flow analysis that you guys were working on and looking at. I would really appreciate that. We'll get that right out there to you. So we are going to be about tools. We are going to be about training. We are going to be about news. We are 2 to 3 times, once or twice a week, something like that. We don't know the frequency yet. We're going to be interviewing guests. We're very excited that this week on Friday, or on Thursday, we've got Matt Faircloth, who's going to be talking to us. And
so
we'll be back tomorrow.
One more thing, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it. We primarily, I'm a hard money lender. Hard Money Bankers is actively lending. We're a direct lender. We make a decision the same day you contact us. We can underwrite the loan and close within 24 hours. So if you are
That's
looking,
crazy, man.
I know we have an amazing, amazing team. Our loan processors are incredible, and I wish I could take credit for it. I can't. But anyway, if you're looking to fund your next project, give me a call. I can give you a quote same day that you contact me, and we can close the next day. So anyway, that's all I got for today. Judah, awesome seeing you. Thanks everybody for being on here. Have a fantastic week. Make the most of it, and that's all I got.
Outstanding, man. Well, let's talk more next week, and we'll go from there. See you, everybody.
See you guys.